Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Phil's Recap and Review. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about the Beatles Get Back documentary, which is on Disney Plus right now. It dropped over Thanksgiving weekend, back to back. What was interesting about it is it's set up, it's a documentary series, it's a movie. It's three, basically 2.5, 3-hour movies back to back that got released 3 days in a row. I kind of wonder why they didn't release them all just in one giant chunk. It was interesting sometimes when you wait to release everything at once, they do it every week, but this was released bang, bang, bang 3 days in a row, which kind of made me feel like I was rewatching the Beatles anthology thing again. But I'm going to talk all about this documentary series, if you want to call it a documentary series, and kind of why maybe it was the greatest thing in the world for me, but for somebody it might not be. This was a simultaneous situation where I would say it was the best thing in the world, and then to someone that might not be into this kind of thing, they could think it was kind of, not quite as exciting as you might want it to be. So I was very much into this. I was anticipating this. This is directed or put together by Peter Jackson. And I'm not alone tonight talking about this episode, talking about this movie, this documentary series, whatever the hell. Of course, I'm joined by the live, there's the Beatles, the live motherfucking chat. We got Casey, Randy, we got Peter Griffin, we got Steph Snow, we got Eric, we got Natalie. Great to see everyone in the live chat tonight, and hope you guys, for anyone that pops in and out tonight, you can call on in at 781-990-8509. Ask me a question about this documentary, any Beatles kind of random topic kind of stuff, or just anything you might want me to riff off or BS on. I'm going to be on for a little while tonight talking about this documentary, and we'll see. I don't know if I want to retell what we see here, but just to get into it again, I had a little bit of a false start. So for some of the people that might be still listening, you might have to hear me repeat myself. Just to kind of set up where we are in Beatles history leading into this documentary. It's a very good time. I believe most of this documentary was filmed or shot around 1968-69 period of time. I could be wrong. Let me see. Let me see if I see it. I have something on my hair in front of me. And it was a 1970s album. So yeah, most of it was probably filmed in 1969. So it was an interesting time in the Beatles' career. Okay, they got to that point where, Beatlemania all at the beginning, she loves you, yeah. This could be a really quick description of Beatles history here. And they get to the point where they were doing concerts right around the time of doing the album Rubber Soul and Yellow Submarine, leading into those albums. They didn't really want to tour anymore because they'd go and play these shows, and then all they would was hear people going, ah, and screaming every time they were playing. And it was before they had good monitors. If anyone's ever been on stage and played music, they didn't have the monitors coming back on them. So basically they were just playing for this wall of, I almost knocked over a bottle of something. They were playing for this wall of emptiness, and they couldn't really hear themselves. So they decided, for creative purposes, they were going to stop touring, stop playing live, and basically turn into a recording band. And that's what led into and they also did the movie Help, leading towards the beginning of that too. And they're like, we don't want to do another movie like this either. So then they got to that point where they recorded probably one of their most famous or well-received albums of all time. Some people's favorite, not necessarily my favorite Beatles album, but I love it. Sgt. Pepper's, which was a complete recorded masterpiece in the way of, almost you could say, Pink Floyd did later with Dark Side. It was a concept album. It was a musical orchestra. George Martin, the guy who was the recording engineer for a lot, or the producer, excuse me, not the engineer, for most of the projects that the Beatles did, that was his favorite project because it was a direction he wanted to take the Beatles. But after that point in time, they also had this manager named Brian Epstein, who was the guy that kind of brought them from a club band to being the biggest band in the world. He was the guy that handled all the business aspects. He also had a very parental aspect towards treating them, like telling them, come on, boys, let's get going, and keeping them motivated to work. Unfortunately, he died of a drug overdose. A lot of stuff that could be a whole podcast into itself about Brian Epstein. But needless to say, he disappeared at a very important time and very difficult time in the Beatles' relationship and in a big transitional point with them. So that with that spot being absent, John Lennon, who de facto for so long in the group was the leader of the group, sort of took a back seat at that point in time because he started to get involved in a whole other mess that we'll get into. And I'm not talking about Yoko. I'm talking about like down the bad drug path and being sort of disconnected and not wanting responsibility in that kind of context. It wasn't so much that he wasn't into the Beatles, and I get that feel again to preview. What's interesting about this documentary is when you watch what it's based on, which is what I'm going to get to in a second. So then they recorded a few more albums, a few more things. Paul kind of took over the group from a recording standpoint. They eventually went to the White Album, which I mentioned before, where they were all individually working in these two studios so they could work on their own and create their own works and kind of work on each other's stuff but not be plagued by it. But Paul McCartney, who I love Paul McCartney, at times he's my favorite Beatle. It changes. Kind of took the reins as the designated dickhead in the band to kind of push things through. And the consensus was, from a recording standpoint, because they had gotten to a couple of difficulties in their interactions, namely in recording Hey Jude and not having guitar solos in Hey Jude, a couple of other stuff, they had decided that maybe to solve this problem, maybe to figure this out a bit better, we should, what did I just do? We should take an album, do this interesting project where initially they were going to play White Album songs live and shoot themselves rehearsing the songs and then putting on a live concert, be back to playing one more big live concert in a public place. Something similar to maybe what Pink Floyd Live in Pompeii was, but somewhere in public. Then they changed it to, no, we should write all new songs and have them film us doing the new songs and practicing the new songs and working them up. But instead of recording the way we usually record, let's go into a whole new location and let's try to produce these songs and record this whole album live. Vocals and all. I mean, playing the instruments, vocals, bam, no auto-tune, no takes, no multiple takes, no in the studio. Like, we need to set up the recording studio so we can record a live album, essentially. And then end it all with a big live performance. This documentary is the real-time footage. Again, it's a documentary in the sense of documenting a period of time. It's not a documentary in the sense that there is a narrative in it other than just being almost like found footage of just being a fly on the wall. Not a fly on the wall. You're an active member because you're part of the crew of the annoying guy directing this thing in the Beatles' face all the time. But you see every day of this. They don't skip a day. And they don't really have they have a few text lines that go through, but there's no, voiceover, disembodied voice telling you the story. The story is visually what you're seeing. And this is where what I was saying before, it's a little funny because this is a documentary thing about the making of a documentary thing. Excuse me. Which is the Let It Be video, the making of the Let It Be. So basically all of this happened in real time before I get into talking about this thing itself. In real time, the Beatles did all of this, eventually went onto the roof of spoiler alert, the roof of their recording studio that they had gone to and performed a few songs live in the middle of London lunch hour. And then after that, scrapped all the recorded material that they had done for this particular album, packaged it into a documentary, The Making of Let It Be, which I think might have even come out way later. And then they all agreed, let's get together one more time and record one more great album and then go our separate ways, at least temporarily. They maybe decide they might get together again. That's, again, we're not talking about the Beatles breaking up I'll mention that later, but I'm just kind of trying to get the real time of where this was in the Beatles' career. So then they came back and did one more album, which was Abbey Road. You can, in this documentary, in this Get Back, you can hear some of the Abbey Road songs being birthed. Something with Oh Darling, I Want You So Bad, Mean Mr. Mustard. There's different songs you can hear them practice and work on. And that's just to get into this thing itself. That's one of the best aspects of it. You hear the Beatles just jamming and playing shitty versions of their old songs. And as someone that's played in bands my whole life, this is why this thing is for me. Seeing the Beatles in the practice setting, in that whole process of being not tight in a mess and getting it to the point where they play those songs on the roof at the end of the movie or at the end of the documentary as a tight band. A lot of that has to do with Billy Preston, who I'll get into Billy Preston in a bit, who is the savior, who's the hero of this particular Get Back movie. When he comes in, he's a ray of fucking sunshine. But so the Beatles were going to record one last album after all this. And then later, it was a big weird situation where the record company took the recordings of the Let It Be stuff and gave it to this guy, Phil Spector, who's a creepy motherfucker, and that's a different story. Phil Spector's a different story altogether. But he ended up producing and working on Let It Be behind the Beatles' back and producing it and then releasing it, adding strings and doing weird mixes that the Beatles never liked. So then they released the making of the documentary, which is the movie thing by this guy, Michael Lindsay, who is the most annoying aspect. One of the two, Yoko, one of the two most annoying aspects of this documentary. Even though I don't really consider it a full documentary, I'm going to refer to it for simplicity form as a documentary for the rest of tonight. So, and if I'm talking about the earlier one, I'll say the Let It Be film. But he's one of the most annoying parts of it. But him getting in the Beatles' face, messing with chemistry a lot. And that's what you see in this a great deal. Okay, I guess where I want to start in all of this, I'm going to go to the motherfucking chat in a second here, but where I want to start is always where I was wrong about my historical opinion looking at this time period in the Beatles' life and career, basically. Yes, Paul was annoying. Yes, they were detached. Yes, in the first episode, George quits. But as Ringo says in that same episode, I quit last year. John quit yesterday. Like, I get a feeling that the way that they were working and arguing and getting into each other's faces, being on each other, like, that's just how they worked, even when they were getting along. And by the end of this, when they start to put it together, not because of editing tricks, you see that they really do love playing music together. And the reasons why they stopped playing music together, a lot has more to do with money and management and shit like that happened later. And also there are some stuff in my mind, with George, and we'll talk about the Yoko Ono situation in a minute, because she didn't help. But as Paul again says at one part, you can feel the tension in the room with Yoko. Okay, we'll talk about Yoko for a second. Yoko's there the whole time. She's sitting there. She never leaves John's side except for when Linda McCartney shows up. But Linda McCartney's daughter shows up at one point and starts and watches Yoko. One of the funniest Yoko parts is Yoko definitely jams with the Beatles. We have times where different Beatles aren't quite there yet. Paul's on drums, John's playing guitar, Yoko's doing her thing. Blah, 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 kiss, kiss, blah. And Linda McCartney shows up a bunch of times in this as well. And she actually jams a little bit at one point too, a little bit. And when her daughter comes in, I forget her daughter's name, she watches Yoko do her screaming thing, and then she runs over to the microphone at one point and starts screaming like Yoko. It was very cute. But Yoko is there the whole time, sitting next to John. They're having band meetings. She's sitting right there. She's constantly him. But I love John Lennon. I really do. I think he's fucking amazing. And I think his sort of casualness in the way he wants to perform sometimes is hypnotizingly amazing how extremely awesome he can be with minimal effort sometimes and just kind of putting it together. Let's just do it, right? He's the one that just wants to do it. But John Lennon is, at least to my eyes, very obviously in the high stages of junkiedom during this whole thing. And I wonder how much Yoko's there to hold him together and make sure he's okay. And I'm not, like, it's annoying. Like, she's sitting there, she's reading the newspaper while they're working on songs. You can see they jot over to her, but John's a mess through a lot of this. He's still awesome. He's fucking awesome. He's funny. He's the one that keeps things lighthearted in the room for real. Like in the group of the Beatles, Ringo's quiet. And again, I guess I love this thing. This is set up in 3 different parts. The first part, as I mentioned, George quits in it, and that's the big drama in it. And the second one is them getting it all back together and moving the studio. And the third one is getting it tight for the show. But the dynamics in the group are, Paul is that guy that we've all worked with that is really good at everything. So you let him take over, but sometimes that can be really annoying because he takes over and he wants things his way all the time. And even when he doesn't get his way, when he relents, he's still passively aggressively telling you how much he wants things his way. That's pretty good. I mean, that's good. But I'm just thinking, could be a little bit better. Paul is a relentless taskmaster, and Paul and John are rude ass fucks to George. It's like not even funny. Both of them are. Paul maybe less. I mean, more so because you could tell that they've known each other longer and they're close and they're closer in some ways, or not, because Paul and George were friends before anyone knew. Like, they were they knew each other first, I believe, out of anybody in the group. But certain points in time, they're both very dismissive and rude to George. Straight up rude to him. Straight fucking up. Even if the Beatles were to continue, and that's one of those things that I get out of this that surprised me as what I was about to say. One of the biggest surprises is how much John Lennon and Paul McCartney seem to get along. Even when they get on each other, they seem to both have such thick skin with each other that they can give each other such shit, and neither one of them seems too offended by it. And how much they love just hanging out and playing and doing all that sort of stuff. Even with Yoko around, with Linda around, the dynamic that the person that is the most unhappy, well, Ringo, we'll get to in a second. He's happy. He's just on a time clock because he's about to do a movie. And he's like, guys, can we get this together? I got to do my movie at the end of the month. George gets treated like straight trash by these two. Especially at one point, I forget what song he's working on, but it's maybe Old Brown Shoe or one of those George Harrison tunes that never quite was a Beatles tune. Because he only gets two songs on an album because they got to be all these Lennon and McCartney extremely beautiful masterpieces, which I agree they are. George Harrison was in the toughest position in show business to have to be there writing songs with those two assholes, and Paul's giving him shit about it or something, or Paul's not into it. And I forget the exact situation. And then usually John is the one that is like, come on, Paul, we're working on George's stuff. He even says that at one point in time. Like, come on, let's get this serious. We're working on, let's focus on George's song here. To Paul, like, to get him, like, take this serious. You better take this serious now. And John said something rude, like, fuck this song. Or, like, I forget what he said. And George was just like, if I'm getting this from both ends, fuck both, screw you guys, I'm going home. And he just walked the fuck out of there. Ringo's quiet. Ringo is there. He's there first every day. He's making people. He is a beautiful, amazing drummer. Like, as somebody that has been in bands, both as playing the drums in the band and being a vocalist with, like, trying to write songs in a group of musicians, having a dude like Ringo that's just sitting there with a friggin' towel on his drum set, making sure everything's quiet, hooking into any rhythm that you want. And again, Paul McCartney is such a dick to Ringo. The foundation of guitar players and bass players being dicks to drummers is Paul McCartney to Ringo. No, don't do it like that. Can you do it like that? I feel like this whole show right now that I'm doing could just be the Chris Farley show. That part was awesome. That part was awesome. But I do want to make it clear that, like I said, that it's a long form, almost if I'm comparing it to reality shows, for instance, it's the difference between watching like an edited version of Big Brother, which would be like an actual documentary footage put together in an edited way, or you're watching the live cams of just the house going and like everything that's going on in the house. This is like watching that. This is like just having a camera on right there. They often remember that it's there and they focus on it. You can see them being annoyed by it at times. There's times where they think the cameras are off and there's hidden microphones filming them, recording them. Lots of good stuff. Let me pop into the live the one and only Billy Shares. We pop into the live motherfucking chat to see. Oh, we got Bernie the Blunt in the live chat. Great to see Bernie. Their fashion is great. I watched the first part. What a shit show. It really is a shit show. You get to see them really break apart. But spoiler to that, Bernie, and I know I'm scrolling back in the chat, so you guys are way past the point of the questions and comments I'm answering. But it comes together. No pun intended, I guess. By the end, it all ends, all that show stuff that they're talking about, and I guess that's a spoiler if you don't know the history, comes together with them playing a few songs on the roof, and it sounds fucking great. Once Billy Preston shows up, things get a lot. You see the tone and everything change, but that first part definitely is the biggest shit show one. That's the one where you get George being dicked on, like constantly just being dicked on, being that little brother that's picked on by the two, because Paul and John are hardcore, like just in the way that they just don't, they don't have tact with each other. So when they're doing what they're doing, you can tell that they take it serious, but they take it serious in this way, like, yeah, you just come on, shut the fuck up. No, let's get this done. John, you're fucking this up, John. And George don't work like that. George gets a little, because George is alone. They're sort of, even when they're working on their own songs, songs that you consider a Paul McCartney song or consider a John Lennon song. This was one of those cool aspects of it, especially the later parts. You see the other one singing that song at times, to kind of encourage him, like John singing Get Back or Paul singing Strawberry Fields at one point in time to kind of get John focused. And there's a thousand, there's a bunch, tons and tons, and they titled them all. And that's one of the things that Peter Jackson did on this that I enjoy. I know Peter Jackson did a lot in the sense of going through all this footage. I think what he did to preserve the quality of it is what's amazing with what he did from a directorial standpoint of putting this together and editing this together. In that standpoint, I think the talent is in what you see in the interactions with the four band members in the process of a band breaking up or in a fight recording this album and all that sort of shit. I'm not sure if Peter Jackson or anybody else could have been interchangeable. If Martin Scorsese did this, or Quentin Tarantino did this, or Steven Spielberg. Like, I'm not saying, I don't think you needed to have an incredible amount of directorial talent to put this thing together. Peter Jackson just needed to stay out of the way, and he did that. If anything, I want to see the Peter Jackson director's cut with everything that was cut. Because this thing's like 8.5 hours of altogether. So hey everyone, I love the documentary series. Remember, if the Beatles hadn't broken up, we wouldn't have gotten all good things past one of the greatest albums. Scott, very good point in the sense of George wouldn't have gotten to be George. We wouldn't have gotten the traveling Wilbury, all that sort of stuff. Although George does say at a point in time, George and John are talking about this in the hopes for the future when they're working with trying to get a new manager, which is almost evil foreshadowing because that's what led to the breaking up of the Beatles. John and George and Ringo all wanting one manager, and then Paul wanting to go with Linda McCartney's Linda Eastman the father, and there was a whole issue. I mean, ultimately, that's really where it became irreparable differences and stuff like that, where it just couldn't come back anymore from that standpoint. But there was talks in this towards the end where George and John are talking about, there's nothing wrong with the fact that we should be able to step out and do our own individual albums and then come back and do it. Yeah. Beatles should have been the proto Wu-Tang Clan in that sense too. They do the Beatles albums and then let each one of them go out and do a solo album all on the, the Wu-Tang label here, all on the Apple label. And I think if the Beatles had been able to figure it out around this time period, you would have seen something like that, even if it was 10, 15 years of them doing solo albums and then eventually coming together for a single here, a single there. I think if money and shit like that didn't get in the way and some of those right at the wrong time, or if Brian Epstein didn't die, like there's a lot of what ifs in the Beatles situation that there's a chance that they could have stayed together. I mean, you wouldn't have had all that amazing John Lennon solo songs, but I feel like you probably would have. I think you still would have had, because he plays Jealous Guy. You get a lot of John Lennon solo songs in this as well, some of his early ones and later ones. But I'm thinking like maybe you wouldn't have got Baby I'm Amazed or Watching the Wheels Go By, but you probably would have in different ways. And you just would have had Paul as the backup singer instead of other people. So I don't know. I think one thing that I took out of the end of this documentary series was there was more to this story about where when I originally saw the Let It Be movie, it shows more, they focus more on the arguing aspect in that and how much they weren't getting along. More of what you see in, like Bernie was saying, in that first part where it's a fucking shit show and they're arguing. The movie, the Let It Be movie, most of that is filmed or focused on the stuff that was filmed in that studio at the beginning before they moved to the Apple building. When they moved to the Apple building, you get very little of that in the movie, but so much of the time was spent there, and then they just flashed to the concert on the rooftop and stuff. But so much of that movie, the movie, not the documentary series that just came out, the Let It Be movie, comes off like you're watching them breaking up. And this times comes off like that, but times it shows you how close they are. It shows you a closeness between some of them that I haven't seen before. And just because you don't get a lot of footage of them together in candid situations like this, you either get the early stuff, which is very fabricated, Beatle-y, or you get after the fact discussions like something like the anthology or the complete Beatles stuff where you get other people talking about it, or John Lennon, the Imagine movie. You're actually seeing it, and you're seeing Yoko in the room. You're feeling that energy. You're feeling that it's a pain in the ass, but that's not breaking anything up. Every guy that's been in the band has had one of the dudes in their bands has their girlfriend sitting there or boyfriend sitting there and just like not doing anything, like just watching the wheels go by, and it's fucking annoying. But it's not breaking up the band. So like, but it is annoying, and Yoko is just like when Linda and her kids show up and they start running around there. You could tell that they're into it, but after a while it's like, oh, can we just get down to business? Or all the fucking camera crew guys, or the dude has nothing to do with the recording of it, and he's trying to film the documentary, and their face like, guys, what we should do for the future of the Beatles, and just getting in their face with all these ideas and stuff. It's annoying. Bernie says, Yoko sitting there just made me mad. I feel bad. Sitting there just made me mad. I feel bad for hating on Yoko. But exactly, I feel bad for hating on Yoko sometimes too, because all she does is love her man. You know what I mean? She really, really loves John. And in this, you get a feel more for her personality at times. A couple of times here and there, you can actually see the real Yoko Ono's personality, which I think in so much of Beatles footage leading up to this, you just see the image of her just sitting there, you know, being annoying. But she's very annoying in this. And not her personality, not the things she says. She's respectful for the most part in the sense of like not interrupting and not, you know. But there's like one part specifically where John tells a joke and all the guys love it and they're laughing, and she's like, I don't get this joke, John. Shh, be quiet. Or like part where John's like, I don't want gum. But they have a cuteness. They're obviously super in love. And it makes me feel bad to say this, but it's like, at times, and what I said earlier, I think John is a junkie during this era. And I think he needs Yoko to kind of carry him there and pick him up every day. But she could leave and come back. Her sticking around is rather annoying. But so is every single person that's stuck in that studio and them trying to set this thing up while they're working on everything. Everything around them is just super annoying. Yoko is just one part of all of it in some ways. And she's not breaking shit up. She's just annoying. And again, we've all been there. And it's not just in a band. It's just when someone can't separate from the Velcro partner. When you're at that Velcro stage, and they were at that Velcro stage, not to mention, as I repeatedly say many times when I'm talking about this, John was gone through so much of this. And when he was edging towards the end of recording sessions to just get out of there and get his fix, I need a fix because I'm going down to that place where, like, John's at the peak of his shit. At least that's the vibe I get. Maybe it got worse after this, but he comes off like and when he's high on his, like, when he's high. I could be wrong. People, Yoko Ono could be in my live chat right now and go, no, John was perfectly straight during all of this. But John seemed like John didn't seem like his head was always quite there. And I don't mean just from smoking some ganjis or doing some trippy. How juicy? Any footage that blew your mind? Did you feel like you were seeing something special? I think for the most part, yes. I think some of the more special moments were the hidden microphone with John and Paul talking at lunch, and hearing John be a little bit more candid with his discussions, knowing he was not on microphone or thinking he wasn't on microphone. I think when they're playing the rooftop show, which is something I've always wanted to see, the full footage from the rooftop show, at the end there when they're playing the songs and Paul is the first to see the cops come up, Paul gets super giddy excited and starts and forces them to go into the next song when they thought they were going to end, and then they just replay the songs again just to piss off the cops. Just because they're like, we're the fucking Beatles and we want to feel like young rock and rollers again. That there was a lot of moments that felt like I was seeing something, not that I shouldn't have, but something special that's different. And Paul is much wittier. Paul is biting. And that's one of those things that you don't realize now, because it's almost like Paul is the Betty White of the Golden Girls here, you know? And you look at Betty White and you're like, she's sweet, she's nice. But Betty White annoyed the fuck out of B. Arthur. And a lot of people on set sometimes, they loved her, they loved working with her. But to her own admission, this is Betty White saying here, I can be a lot. I am always this cheerful, and I'm always this intense, and I'm always that. She used to play to the audience. She would improv, riff out, all this sort of stuff, and be very like, let's do this. You know, very, very in your face. Paul is kind of like that. Paul is the Betty White of the Golden Girls in this situation. But he's biting. There was one time, or a couple times, I don't know if it's in part 2 or part 3, but there's one part where he's pissed at John about something, and he is being a dick. And everyone thinks, you know, you see Paul McCartney now, he's you know, an international treasure, Paul McCartney, you know, such a sweet man, you know, like Paul McCartney. He is a dick, not just the George stuff, to John a couple of times where he's just talking shit to John and being passive aggressive, biting. Paul is very, very witty and, as you said, and very biting with his words. Where John, I knew John was goofy at times, and he was the lubrication for the room. But I definitely, to step back up to Steph's question, the juiciest thing was that conversation that they were having, that when it wasn't being recorded, because that's when you hear them sort of, John basically saying, or Paul say, the group's always been yours. You're the leader of the group. And John saying, I don't want it anymore. I gave that to you when Brian died. You became the leader of the group and been running with it. And I'm okay with that. You let me do my thing, essentially, but we need to be nicer to George. We're both just dicks to George. This is what this is about. And then there's a funny line that John says, and this is just how much of a dick John is when John's being a dick. George leaves and everyone's like, what do we do? George quit the band. And John goes, if he doesn't come back tomorrow, we'll just get Eric Clapton. And he says it in such a serious way, like, fuck George. We'll just get Eric fucking Clapton. He'll do it better anyway. It's just like he said, John could be, I've heard stories about it because George Martin's talked about it. A lot of people have mentioned it that knew John Lennon well, but you see more of it here. John, give peace a chance, love, the image of John Lennon is so beautiful. You see it a lot in the making of the Imagine video movie. If you haven't seen that, definitely search it out, especially seeing him deal with the press in some situations where he yells at someone for being like, I grew up, I'm not a mop top anymore, I grew up, you should grow up. Excuse me, but John can, most of what I've said for the whole first almost hour, that I'm talking here is John and Paul are dicks. and John can be harsh. But I would say I'm not going to say he walks on eggshells, but you can tell how much he loves and appreciates Paul. He doesn't really go rude to Paul. He just talks truth to Paul. He's ragged on George. John rags on George. John's just a dick in general sometimes. But he treats Paul very respectfully. Like, he knows how talented Paul is. And he's like, I got to do your thing, Paul. Sometimes he'll get bored here and there, but he, like, with like Along a Winding Road or Let It Be, and he'll make fun of it and lighten up the mood and stuff and fuck up notes here and there. But for the most part, you can tell like he's psyched to be a part of Paul McCartney and Paul's psyched to be a part of John. And that's very, very evident here through the whole situation. And yeah, Yoko Ghost wrote all the songs. It's definitely special if you're a Beatles fan. Show Me Who Likes Her, I Don't Know One People. They kind of got canceled. I really want to see, I love documentaries. Abbey Road is, Scott, that's what I was when people talking about Sgt. Pepper's, people say that's their favorite album. I would say Abbey Road's my favorite Beatles album, which is the last Beatles album recorded, which makes it hard that it's my favorite because I feel like they could have kept making great albums or at least great songs here and there, of course, through time. But yeah, John is a dick a lot of the time to Paul. I mean it to everybody, but he's very respectful of Paul in some ways. And Paul, same to John, except for a couple times where they get annoyed with each other, like normal annoyed with each other. And they all kiss Ringo's ass. Ringo is their baby. Everyone loves Ringo. None of them, like, Paul's a drummer dick to him, like, play like this, do this. But they all like, it's almost like, we don't want to upset Ringo. And Ringo barely talks, but when he does, people listen. Who knew Ringo was the most stable Beatle? And he is. He's there every day, as I said earlier, every day, playing there, sitting there, keeping his mouth shut, seeing him write Octopus's Garden, and then seeing George watch him write it and then go there and start helping him. And then all the guys are kind of laughing at him, but helping him at the same time. It's a good vibe with Ringo. They love the Ringo. Bernie says, I got to go with Rubber Soul or Revolver. The Rubber Soul, Revolver, that era of the Beatles, it's tough to argue with it being maybe the best because it's the peak of everything that they were leading up to. Before they go into the bubble, which is amazing too. I think every Beatles record has its place, whether you're into the early She Loves You, yeah, Love Me Do kind of please Beatles stuff, or the middle ground of the Beatles, which I feel starts with Help and goes like Help, Rubber Soul, Revolver, those three albums, which is this almost transitional period where they started to get a little deeper, a little more complex with their harmonies. The songs started getting just more introspective, especially John's songs like Norwegian Wood popped up around there. And We Can Work It Out. And I feel like those three albums were really the perfect balance of them still playing live sometimes. And then you get into Sgt. Pepper, which is exceptionally amazing. A lot of people's favorite albums. One of the best recorded albums of all time, concept albums, exceptionally amazing. I love it, just not one of my favorite, kind of like with The Wall and Pink Floyd. I understand how great it is. I understand it's some people's favorite and that's their thing. It's not mine, but I love it. Magical Mystery Tour is a good album, not a great album, but a decent follow-up to that. The White Album, I love the fucking White Album. I have no problems with it, but it's definitely not as good as those 3 albums that you mentioned, if we're saying as like a project album. It's the White Album, again, it's excess, and I like the excess of it, but it's also individual. It feels like a collection of solo songs and demos at times. Some big songs too, but I love it. Don't get me wrong, but there's a separation feel on that record. And then you get into Abbey Road, and I believe that, unless I'm missing something in the middle here, maybe like Yellow Submarine album or something. But then you get into, they recorded the Let It Be sessions, and then Abbey Road, and then Let It Be got released afterwards. Abbey Road got, so to me, Abbey Road just is them getting back to doing what they were doing, coming off playing live for that whole time period with the Let It Be stuff, so that they were all supercharged. But I would say you just named my next 3 my favorite Beatles albums are all those ones Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, Abbey Road, and I really, really love Magical Mystery Tour and Let It Be. And I know Let It Be's rough, but I still enjoy it. I enjoy some of the songs. Yoko gets the blame, but George wanted to make his own album. Lots of reasons they broke up. Paul wanted to record his album too, and recorded the McCartney album. But I think they don't get into it in this, but if I'm reading my speculation from some foreshadowing stuff that Peter Jackson did and what I've heard, a lot of it had more to do with the management stuff and the financial aspects. But there were a lot of reasons. I think either way, they would have taken a long break after Abbey Road. And I think, whatever, people can think what they want, and we can have this alternative history if I want to here. But if John hadn't unfortunately been assassinated, he would have. If John hadn't been murdered, they would have gotten together and recorded again. 100% There's 0% chance that they wouldn't have gotten together again, in my opinion. Like they had all sort of forgiven each other. They had all worked with each other individually, except for John and Paul. But they had hung out, and they hung out a lot. A lot of people don't know this, but it's a very true story, or it's based on, there's some truth to it, that John and Paul were hanging out a lot at the time that Saturday Night Live did that. Lorne Michaels did that. Come on down to the studio and play. And they thought about going down there, but they weren't practiced. Some of that's urban legend, but I'm going to choose to believe it. But John and Paul hung out a lot. And John, in some of his last interviews, was talking about, of course, we're going to do it again. It's just a matter of time. We have all the time in the world. So I think you would have, in the mid 80s, even in the 90s, with the whole like grunge thingy period, you would have got like a beat. And when the Beatles anthology came out, they would have still done the anthology, and John would have been a part of it. And then that would have produced probably a Beatles reunion album and maybe a tour. I mean, I'm doing a lot of creative, but with what Tony and I have been doing each week with the what ifs and stuff, the what if scenario of John Lennon not passing, I think you would have seen the Beatles absolutely recording again together. I don't think any of the wounds that we see here in this thing, whereas supposedly one of the hardest sessions that they ever had, one of the closest they came to breaking up within a session, was anything that would have destroyed them long term. It's all money and bullshit that stopped it, and all that stuff would have healed over time. Yeah, you can see the inner workings. They were jamming, and John and Paul sounded terrible together. Then boom, they wrote another song, spot on. They were perfect. And yes, there's a lot of, and that's, you would see that a lot. Like because I think a lot of times John doesn't sing in full voice during practice, where Paul and George is the same way. He doesn't sing full voice a lot during practices. Paul is always singing in his best voice. Paul at times can sound like shit when he's doing when he goes quick or something like that, but Paul's a fucking show off too. In practices, he's always like at 12. John's like, it's 8:00 in the fucking morning. My voice isn't woken up yet. And Paul's like, woo, baby, because, and John just looks at him like, you fucking ass. And he's smoking butts. He's like, I love how there's a warning going into this documentary. Warning, there's people railing cigarettes, like railing constantly. If it's been a long time since you've seen chain smoking, be prepared for it. And then you see fucking Paul McCartney. Fuck you, Paul McCartney. The rest of them at least sound like they smoke cigarettes when they're singing. Fucking Paul doesn't sound like shit is like doesn't sound like anything's down that throat except for a fucking sweet oil dripping down his fucking beautiful fucking sounding voice through this whole fucking thing. And going into that scream as a metal singer at times to myself, like his scream and just how naturally it comes, and then he can go into a sweet, pure voice. Like, fuck you, Paul McCartney. I'm going to say what all the other Beatles were thinking at points in time during this fucking documentary. Fuck you, Paul McCartney. You are a dick. Yeah, Paul did try to get rid of Ringo a couple of times. Fucking love this documentary. Actually had more respect for Paul for trying to keep things on track. Me too, because I think a lot of times you could think that even in the Let It Be, the movie, it looks like Paul is controlling things. Paul is he's a de facto leader, and he does it in a humble, weird way that makes it hard to get mad at him while he's doing it. You know, but he's the one that once what happened to Brian happened, Paul is the only one that kept it going. The rest of them were in different places. George was desperately trying to record an album of the fucking, 50 fucking songs that he had on backlog because he can only put 2 tracks on a record because of fucking John and Paul being in his band. Ringo was about to do a movie with Peter Sellers. The Peter Sellers part was one of the most awkward fucking things I've ever seen in my fucking life. Peter Sellers comes in, he's like, you guys are all stoned. I'm getting the fuck out of here. And John just starts ragging on him. I love it. I fucking love it. And Ringo wants to get into Hollywood and do movies and shit like that. And Paul wants to just keep recording music his way. Paul is to the point where he's needing to record that McCartney album where he records every instrument. People that don't know Paul's first solo album, and I want to say maybe 4 total of his solo albums, maybe 3, maybe 4. Someone can check my math, put it in the comment section later, but that Paul plays every single instrument on the albums. He's just one of those guys that needs to do that every once in a while. A lot of musicians, sometimes they don't play the drums too, but Paul's definitely plays the drums on those albums too. He wants everything to sound his way. I think Prince has done that a couple of times too, maybe or at least at times he does, because Prince is the most ridiculous bass player in the fucking planet, or one of them. And also he puts together a lot of music. Oh yeah, that's a good nose scratch. Oh yeah. The very first Smashing Pumpkins album, Gish, Billy Corgan plays every instrument but drums. Anyways, so Billy Preston, I've mentioned him a couple times, he's such an incredible keys player and a great stringed player, and he can sing. He just fit in the band. If we had got the dream scenario where Abbey Road had been so good and they had felt so awesome about this that they had gone on tour as a touring band, Billy Preston should have gone with them. He kills it in this position in the band. They're playing the song Don't Let Me Down, and they're talking about how they need something for it, and he just happens to, and they also, the beginning of the documentary, they're talking about how amazing Billy Preston is playing with Ray Charles and the Stones and destroying it, and George is like, he's even a little bit better as a player than Ray Charles is, and then later on he shows up in the studio and he sits in there and he jams with them. That was one of those parts where I started to feel butterfly kind of feeling as you think about the Let It Be recordings with him. And I love how at the end, this is one of the great things that Peter Jackson did, was when you got a version that was the album version or the studio version or the one that they did in the movie, they get a little graphic on the screen that goes, because they're recording live takes. Remember that. Next time you listen to Let It Be, Don't Let Me Down on the radio, Two of Us, I Got a Feeling, the song, I Got a feeling deep inside, oh no. They recorded that fucking live on top of the rooftop, I believe. I'd have to rewatch it, but I'm pretty sure they said at the bottom when the rooftop recordings was the one on the Let It Be album. Unfucking believable. Where you're in an age, even myself, when I record, you can't record shit live as much. Maybe you record you'll record these scratch tracks where the band will play live, but just to get the drums. And then sometimes you'll keep some of the string players will keep their sounds, but the vocalist never keeps what they record in that scratch track. And then some bands record differently. But the most often way that you would record would be you'd get isolation, you'd record the drums first. You'd do like a scratch track where they would play through the song the way you want it to get the drums tight. But the instruments can be a little off. They don't need to be quite tight as long as the rhythm and the amount of times is done. Once you get the drums locked down, then each instrument can go and lay their track down to the beat when it works. You can also lay that down to a metronome at times too, so it's even easier and you can strap things up later. And a lot of Beatles records are recorded in that way. A lot of other stuff. Some bands do record live as the band itself, but a lot of the times they don't record the vocals live. Some bands have done that. I think Pearl Jam did that with the Versus album. I think Black Crowes have done that a little bit. Some bands do, and you can hear the jamminess of it, but it's not as common, especially in modern music. It's very much, maybe more so now that you can get better isolation, but for the most part, overdubs are just a fucking thing. And when you listen to some of these recordings and you're like, they're live recordings, Jesus, but they played these songs this way. So what did Peter Jackson do? He did things like that. He decided how long takes are going to happen. He went through the footage. He upgraded the quality of the footage to make it look high def like it could have come out yesterday, making sure all the sound is up. Some of the audio points where they didn't have video, put some video clues up there, put some text up here and there. I don't know if Peter Jackson did much except for 2 or 3 years, smoke a lot of weed and watch a lot of footage of the Beatles and see even more of this than I get to see, and I'm pissed off. I want to see all 200 fucking hours of it. Seriously, I could sit through all 200 fucking hours of this shit because it's good background stuff too, just because when I'm doing something, like typing up a script or something, and then I'm looking across and watching, it's just good to be on there. It's inspiring. They were trying to write an album in this huge ass space. There was a Hare Krishna. Yeah, there's a Hare Krishna in the corner. There's Yoko reading a newspaper. There's a whole crew. There's this director in their face, fucking annoying. But Peter just edited it and decided how long certain takes would be. He was the person that got put in charge of putting this all together from a footage standpoint, going through the hours and hours of footage and logging it, restoring it, and deciding how much of it we get to see. He did a great job of putting it together, and it doesn't look old. Don't know how they did it to make it look so HD. That's how I feel about it too. If all he did was increase the quality to the HD and the way it looks, that's the most amazing part. It seriously looks like it could have been filmed yesterday. They do play Maxwell Silverhammer. I love all the alternate lyrics to stuff. That's one of the funny things when you're watching this. There's at times where they're writing songs and they don't have the lyrics quite yet, and you could be screaming at the screen like, "This is the lyric! What, you don't know the lyric?" And it's one of those moments where, at least for me anyways, I had these like, "Oh yeah, they haven't written it yet." That's not the words. It's this. I do wonder how much of this was edited out. It doesn't seem like a lot was. It seems like maybe some of the dead spaces were, but they definitely keep most of what I would assume be the interesting stuff in there. But I do know Paul and Ringo produced it in some ways and probably had Final Cut choice to look at it and be like, could you take that part out? We don't want to see this. They probably took out some of the blatant fucking smoking weed in there, or like some shit, and some of the shit talking that they had, because they definitely seem like they probably talk shit about other bands and stuff. Or maybe a couple of things that they said to each other. Maybe they took out something that Paul said he doesn't want to look bad. I don't know. I'm not sure how much they took out, but they definitely kept a lot in to make all of them look simultaneously bad and good at times. Except for Ringo. He always looked good. I don't think Ringo did anything that was sketch or weird or hinky. Like, Ringo was the coolest when the kid was there. Ringo is the coolest in every practice. Ringo is like, stays in practice, plays all through, and at the end of the practice is like, I don't feel good, I'm going to go to the doctors. Not like in the middle. Excuse me. He plays all day. As a musician, this is another reason why I loved it. It may be kind of daunting if you're, because I stress to say, if you if you're not a Beatles fan, or if you're a Beatles fan, you're going to love this. If you're a fan of just their music, and that's fine and great, and you love it, you turn the Beatles on when you hear them on the radio and you enjoy it and that sort of stuff, this might not even be, you might not even like this. This is, I will say exceptions as well. If you're really into the idea and understanding how and what happened in the process of them breaking up, how their inner workings worked, and you're into sort of being a fly on the wall kind of stuff and just seeing almost real-time footage, you'd be into this. Or as Igor says, as a musician, it makes you feel more comfortable for every argument you've ever gotten into with your own bandmates, to see the Beatles get into the same exact fucking arguments, the same exact way that their songs sound like shit every single time till it sounds good. And then you can make it sound good every time after that. That the 7,000 times that you play the songs and you get so sick of them, even though that they're good songs, but to us, we're like, oh my God, this is an amazing song. You see them, the looks on their faces, they play Get Back for the 7,000th time and be like, it's like they're doing that to get fucking back. Paul is just jamming one of his own songs, Strawberry Fields in the middle of a random stuff. They're doing Ray Charles songs, Elvis songs in the middle, just like you do in practice, where especially John's that guy, we all have him in our band, that plays cover songs in the middle of your songs to just fill up the space. It felt like I was watching, yes, the Beatles, but it seems obvious, but you're watching the Beatles at a rehearsal for 29 days or 19 days, whatever it is. I forget how many days it is. Where was it? Well, how many days is that, you motherfucker? How many days does it go? It's I'm sorry, I got the Wicca motherfucker. 21 days. It's like you're watching real-time band practice for 21 days. And it looks like real band practice. That anyone that's been in a band or in a play or in a group in college knows these dynamics. And as Bernie said, the process is fascinating watching them do this. Tony, motherfucking pajamas! Great to see you live, my friend. I'm wearing some, well, not Tony. I almost want to get Tony the Tiger pajama bottoms just so when you're watching, I can stand up and do a little dance and go, I'm wearing Tony pajamas, but I'm wearing Ninja Turtles pajamas. Paul was right on most things, though. I like Paul the most now, but then again, I only saw part one. That's the infuriating thing about it, Bernie. It's really the infuriating thing about it. And anyone who's ever worked with one of these type of people, again, whether it's at your job, one of those people that just has the sunshine on them. Sunshine, lollipops, and I'm right at everything. You know those fucking people. Because that's the thing. Paul is right most of the fucking time. He's annoyingly right. Paul is in tune most of the time, and the other guy's out of tune. Paul is right when he's saying, John, you're playing too busy there. George, you shouldn't play a guitar solo there. You shouldn't do this there. No, that's good what you're doing there, Ringo. But, you can only do that march part for 2 measures there and then do that over there, right there. You can't do that there. And the fucked up shit, again, is most of the time Paul's right. And that's why someone like John Lennon is so good for him. Because John Lennon, at core, is someone that just likes to just do it. Make it up as you go. Jam. Let it go. And just be cool. And be awesome. And George is influenced by both of them. But and I don't want to poo-poo George, but I'm just saying the leaders of this band. And the songwriting partnership between the two of them. What's so great about it is from the foundation of their relationship. Which is when Paul showed up to the show to see John. John was performing a song. I think it was Bebop-a-loo, She's My Baby, something like that. I forget the song that John was singing, but to Paul's words, John was singing the song, obviously didn't know the words and was just making them all up, but making it work by making up lyrics on the spot. Then when they met backstage, Paul picked up a guitar, played for John. What impressed John about Paul was Paul knew all the words to the song I got a cold, it's a wrecking machine. Keep it down, and she's my queen. 50 crack rock or whatever it is. Sound to the 20th floor downtown. The elevators go around and sorry. And he knew all the words. We got Dwarf Burger Swamp Beard in the live chat. I see you a little ahead of me. Revolver, the favorite Beatles album. I blame Yoko. They would have dumped too much money on to not play the reunion tour. Exactly. Exactly. If they had come together after the Beatles anthology, if that had happened, they would have gone on the Beatles anthology tour. Same like Plant and Page did. Same like the Floyd did. Same like the Stones never fucking stopped. Like they would have done a tour, or at least a live from Madison Square Garden kind of one-time show of some kind to sell pay-per-view tickets for it or something with association of the Beatles anthology instead of us getting Free as a Bird and Free Love and stuff as the big once in a lifetime presentation. They would have post the anthology had 5-song Beatles performance of some kind or something. Paul was right. He was right. Stella, come on. Yes, Igor, I was mentioning her earlier. Linda's daughter was equal to as annoying as Yoko. She was cute. You're cute. You're really annoying now. Shut up. And I love the look on all of their faces. Like John especially. He was like, oh, you're so cute. And then it got to a point where they were really working on something and they're like, shut up, kid. And then the girl picked up the microphone and started yelling to the microphone like Yoko. One of the best parts. Scott says, Bernie, Paul is my favorite from the early stuff, but George is my favorite solo artist of all of them. My favorite song is Here Comes the Sun. I think some of that George material that never came through, I appreciate George's stuff even more so. Like Old Brown Shoe just like gets me in my soul. I Me Mine. I think as George went on, some of those later George songs are just so fucking good because he had to make them so fucking good to get on the albums. I love that Frank Sinatra quote. Something is the greatest Lennon McCartney song ever written. Excuse me, Frank. George Harrison wrote that. Oh yeah, George Harrison. Yeah, yes. But yeah, George as a solo artist was amazing. I think maybe I like John the most as a solo artist, but I don't know because I think per capita for John's songs, I like them the most from post his career. But the problem with John's songs post the Beatles is you got to get, just like George gets on Beatles albums, you got the Yoko cuts. And on that last album, like Double Fantasy, which is one of my favorite John Lennon's from his material on it, because I think it shows up like a grown-up John Lennon. He's off the stuff. He's had that year of retirement, being a father, and really was like doing it because he really wanted to anymore, not because he felt like he had to. So I think some of the stuff on Double Fantasy is some of Lennon's best written solo stuff. But half those songs are Yoko songs. Especially my favorite, Kiss, 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 Kiss Me Love. Just one kiss, kiss'll do. Fucking Yoko songs. I'm dying inside. Oh, Yoko, they don't show drugs use, I'm assuming. There's one point where John pulls something out of his pocket that looks very drug. I don't know if it was a joint or like some other kind of drug or some weed or something. There's a couple times where they maybe pull out some weed here and there, but they don't really show a lot of drug use. And except for John looking, as I've said a few times, looking very junkied out at times and needing fixes and disappearing and coming back, being like, hey, everybody, I'm back. You know, like I'm feeling good now. That kind of vibe at times. Hey, we got Edward Martin in the live chat. Great to see Edward Martin. Great to thank you everybody that's popped in tonight to talk about this with me this evening. I was in a mood to just babble about something. I wasn't sure what I was going to come out for. And I was like, I just watched this weekend. Might as well come out here and talk a little bit about this documentary. Always means a lot to me. You guys coming out and sharing a fun little discussion with me. Let me toast a drink to all of you guys. Cheers to you. Cheers to everyone. Happy Thanksgiving to those that celebrate such motherfucking things. Okay, so yeah, there's lots of foreshadowing to Traveling Wilburys. There's a lot of foreshadowing to a lot of stuff. I love one of the early ones. I've said it a couple of times now. I love how John plays Jealous Guy with completely different lyrics and a couple of other stuff. There's a lot of foreshadowing to Abbey Road stuff, but there's a lot of stuff. when Paul goes and meets the manager towards the end, as I mentioned earlier, the negative foreshadowing for future bad stuff. Excuse me, I need a quick musical interlude break, and I wish I could play the Beatles, but I don't want to get flagged. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's take a couple more chats here. Hey, everybody. Hey, my peeps. We got Sonic in the live chat, Jay. Can't Buy Me Love is by far my favorite. I love Can't Buy Me Love. Funny movie, too. But that was a song, I believe. I love the merging of the two voices in that. That's definitely an excellent era of the Beatles. Very exciting era. The early, the fun. I love Hard Day's Night and Help to his movies. I know maybe they didn't have the best times filming both those movies, but I very much enjoy that dynamic as well. And great to see Muhammad in the live chat too. 8 days a week. The Beatles are like the cast of Breaking Bad. It's a murderer's row of talent. You do have the high points of, Jesse and Lennon and Walter McCartney there. But then the rest of the cast really hammers it out. Excuse me. You got Hank Harrison over there doing an amazing job. And then Ringo Starr. Skylar Starr? Skylar Starr sounds better. It really does. Oh, we got great to see Jay in the live chat. Great to see Devi, little Devi. Animals is it's funny you say that, Bernie. A lot of people don't love Animals as much as I do as well. Animals is one of my favorite Floyd albums as well, because I feel like it's one of the ones that they sound most like a band jamming. And I think the lyrics on that album are so on point. It has one of my favorite Pink Floyd quotes of all time. You have to be trusted by the people that you lied to. So when they turn their backs on you, you get the chance to put on the knife in. And sheeps and dogs, pigs on the wing. I fucking love Animals, Bernie. Percy Garcia, the live chat, true too. Yeah, it is times for some hippie activities. Sorry, I can only talk about the Beatles for so long without just needing to go full hippie activity right here. And I'm back. So yes. So I don't even know. I mean, I've been talking about this I'm like, where do I start? I haven't even started, but I've been talking about this for a while. I'm not sure what else to say about it other than you should watch it. The first part, as I said, is probably the biggest shit show of them all. The second part shows more how they can come back together and how they can sort of figure things out. And there's a little bit more freeform, interactive aspects. And then the last part is them basically getting the thing together. Let's see what Wikipedia says. In the first part 1, which is days 1 to 7, the first week, Beatles begin recording at the Twickenham Studios, the big fucking stupid studio. It's meant to be the first television special, but the recording session, George Harrison quits. Now, the second one, after Harrison's departure, they keep the rehearsals going. The live show is scrapped. And then that by the end is when Billy Preston comes in and sort of makes everything happy. And I kind of want to talk a little bit more about Billy Preston. Now, Billy Preston he played with so many people. He played with Little Richard, played with Sam Cooke, he played with Ray Charles, played with the Beatles, played with Sly and the Family Stone, played with George Harrison alone, played with the Rolling Stones, Ringo and his all-star band, John Lennon. Billy Preston is amazing. He's one of the most underrated, talented human beings to ever walk the earth, and he's on so much. And he's also, what you'll learn in this situation, nothing but positive energy. And for a group that needed some serious positive energy and worked better when you had them not having to deal with just themselves, the minute he shows up, the mood lightens. I'm not saying you don't have negative moments that come after that point, but almost literally right when Billy Preston shows up, they start having some fun. And they just start enjoying themselves on a level that you don't really get to see before that. And I think that's where it's a sad thing, because I think a tour with other musicians would have been great for them. because they were so stuck with each other because all they did was record, and they made sure that they recorded all the instruments. Maybe occasionally they'd bring in orchestra, or George Martin would play here, or Eric Clapton would play there, where they brought him in for While My Guitar Gently Weeps or something. But they wouldn't get to sort of jam. So you get very stewy with everyone all around. So I think if you put together a band like almost like Floyd had towards the end, where you have the whole, the backup singers, you have the whole set, like a tour like Paul McCartney tours with, like that kind of band all around you, with just the Beatles on the front of all of that, I think would have created so much fun in their minds at that time period. If they had been able to figure it out to go on a tour somewhere, even a small tour in 1968, 69, I think that could have alleviated a lot of stress. Because once they get the jamming going in this, in part 2 and part 3, even when it doesn't sound great, you can see the passion that they have for playing with each other. And because of Ringo and Paul almost always being tight, when everything else is a mess, it still kind of sounds okay. But sometimes Paul plays drums, John will play bass, Yoko will scream. But I had to go see this show live. And when they start practicing all the songs, and they don't even play everything at the show, like they end up playing the same 4 songs, is it? Maybe 5 songs? Like a few times on the roof at the end, where they were practicing a bunch of other songs that they just needed longer to get tight. And that's where they kind of decided at the end. The other thing that was interesting to me that I didn't know or didn't realize was when they get to the point where they're going to perform on the roof, Paul and George were whiny little bitches. If it was up to them, they wouldn't have done it. John and Ringo were like, yeah, fuck yeah, we're going to play live. Like, let's get the fuck up on the roof. Like, what are we doing? We talked about this for so long. I want to do it. Like, they get to the end, like right at the end, the last minute where and Paul and George are like, oh no, we're going to do this. Especially George. George is like, well, I don't want to go on the roof. George is that guy. I always thought John was that guy. This is where like misconceptions got exposed for my thoughts of the Beatles in a good way. Like not in like, oh my God. And maybe this is this age, maybe it's stereotypes. I always thought maybe George was really, really quiet. Ringo was the guy that kept everything light. John was the wet blanket. And Paul, I always knew Paul was this. You could always tell Paul was this guy. Maybe I didn't quite know, as Bernie was saying, I didn't know maybe he was as witty as he was, and I didn't realize how much of a dick he can be sometimes too. But for the most part, like control freaky, guy that's good at everything, dude. Like you can tell that about Paul. But George and John are a little different and Ringo are a little different than I thought they were going to be. Ringo's the quiet one. George is the wet blanket about everything. I don't know about that. Well, they'll be like, Beatles, you sound like shit. You know what? Like he's the pessimistic voice in the room most of the time. And he's the one that gets to Paul a little bit. And Paul's like, yeah, maybe. And thinks too much. Paul's a little pessimistic too, but he does it in an optimistic way. John's very much like, if there's tension in the room, he's like, blah, 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 blah. Hey, everybody. Like every time he sees the camera, he's like, ah. Or when he's doing songs, he's always making up words and being crazy and being fun. Like if anyone else was doing it but John Lennon, it might be obnoxious, but it's John Lennon and they all know he's fucking amazing. So they're all like, oh, thank you, John, for breaking the tension in the room. And sometimes John feels like he can't do it. And he's just like, I can't do this. And I think that's where, at least that's my perception. But every time they want to do something, George is usually the one that's like, I don't want to do that. John and Ringo, for the most part, are the yes men. They're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's party. Let's have fun. And I like that about John. Like, and it's not that I thought John was, I just thought that this period of time, John was so checked out because he was so already over it. And with the whole Yoko thing, that he had no interest in anything Beatles and was just checked out 100%. I just think he's a little bit junkiness or whatever like that, but he's for the most part having a good time. You can tell when he's not having a good time and it's more because he's bored. It's not because he's pissed. It's not because he feels uncomfortable. It's not because he feels unwelcome or his ideas aren't being heard or he's not being allowed to creatively express himself in the way that he wants. In fact, you see this later when he's recording the Imagine album. He gets pissed at other people trying to sing backup with him that can't match him right pitch-wise. He starts yelling at this dude like, fuck you, hit the pitch right. And because he's never had to have to worry about that with Paul. Paul, and especially when they're working on things later and John's actually singing things good and Paul hears him doing it, Paul's voice will adapt to John's and enhance John's voice. And you see the look on John's face like, thank you, Paul. Like no one backs up John like Paul does. Whereas Paul singing alone is a very amazing sound. And when the other Beatles back him up, it's almost they sound better in doing harmonies or doing off vocals off of like Paul singing alone. But when John sings, having that Paul voice underneath him a little bit gives John's voice this roar to it that is just one of the best sounds to my ears that ever has existed. Yes, John sounds amazing in his solo stuff and can recreate that, but to me, John almost sounds younger in his solo stuff because his voice is quieter. And in the Beatles stuff, he always has the umbrella of Paul's voice laying down the foundation, so he's working off of it. And when they hit those moments and John looks over at him and they smile at each other, it's like, fuck, man. It's so good. And John knows that. And I don't think he ever wanted to be without that. I think he would record it. At least that's the vibe I get like from him singing. He's never like, I don't ever see him looking and he's seen Paul backing him up when he's singing one of his songs and being like, Paul, would you just shut up? He's like, no, help me out more, let's do it. So yeah, John's much more lighthearted than I thought in the sense. And George is more pessimistic. I know of the Beatles, but haven't really listened to them. This will be more of a learning session for old Sonic. I know Stay Together, but John was a horrible dad to Julian. Horrible dad to Julian. Horrible. Wasn't even a dad to Julian. And a pathetic husband to Cynthia. Like, he tried to hide her. John was a right bastard in a lot of ways. And again, he's this image of, peace and love and whatever, but John was a dick in all those situations, he would lie to people when he was already married just because the Beatles weren't supposed to be married. Paul had a wider vocal range though. In the White Album, you really went from Mother Nature's Son to Helter Skelter, which was amazing. It's true. I think John's voice is more, how do I explain this? Because you're right. Paul McCartney has one of the most multi-purposed voices ever. He can go from singing almost an operatic to almost metal screaming at times. John Lennon is, I'm not going to compare him to this person because I am comparing him to this person, but I think John Lennon has a much, much, much better voice, but it's always John doing it. It's like Bob Dylan, like John Lennon, it's about the words and the exposure of the words. The sound of his voice is amazing. It really is. But you hear that John's voice isn't always 100% every single day. And John's voice doesn't work in all applications in the way that Paul's does, in the sense of the way he writes his songs. Maybe John would have gotten there later, but to his own admission, John's like, I'm a rock and roller. I want to write rock and roll songs. Raw rock and roll songs. Paul is like a music archaeologist, constantly digging and trying to discover shit and change and adapt and create orchestrations and shit. Like the whole second half of the Abbey Road album. John didn't love that. He worked on it. He helped make it happen. But that was George Martin and Paul wanting to do this like epic illustration of music coming together that all fits together. They gave side one to John in the way that's just track after track after track because John wanted part of the reason they did the whole Let It Be thing was because John wanted to get back to being raw and just be a rock band and jam and play. Look what he did with Plastic Ono Band, or after the fact, he got much more lax, except for when he recorded and then he'd get pissed off that people weren't Paul. Steph, Phil, I love hearing your thoughts. Totally going to check this out. Have you seen the new Will Ferrell, Paul Rudd show on Apple? Not yet, but it is something I do want to check out. And thank you so much, Steph. I don't often talk about music stuff, but it is something I enjoy talking about. I think the only other thing like this I did was the Pink Floyd discussion, but I've been wanting to do a Beatles type discussion at some point, and I'll try to do some more of these kind of things in the future. I do have a good time talking, as much of a good time talking about like music stuff as I do television. I just don't know as much compared to, say, like, my cousins or some other people that I know. My friend Matt, who does the Sopranos thing with me, or some other people that I more know some of this stuff because of being friends with people that have such an amazing musical knowledge and having a lot of very great musicians included in my friend group, especially Dwarf Burger Swamp Beard in the live chat. So I'm gonna take a trip to the moon. I'm gonna get there soon, baby. I hope you're still listening. I wish I still had that recording. I'd play it right now. Oh my goodness. Yep, Wings, Band on the Run is classic. What's funny about Wings is there was definitely a point in time when Wings was so popular that some folks, because everything is so hyperbolic and in the moment, some people, you just forget that other people had other bands. It's like someone saying like Dave Grohl had another band before the Foo Fighters. Paul McCartney had another band before Wings. I remember hearing that. Well, I'm old, but I'm not that old, but I remember my uncle telling me that, or other people that were alive around that time period where Wings was huge, that people were just like, what? Because as popular as the Beatles have been forever, there was a time period where they weren't as popular, and then they had a resurgence of some sort. And yesterday, well, my brother seemed so far away. It is so hard to compare the two because they were so different. It is, and that's what made it so awesome, that it's hard to compare the two of them because they're so different, but their voices, for me anyways, is the best two singers in a band singing together that we've ever been lucky enough to have. And those two voices in rock and roll together, like when you get when I'm time now, whipping my time away from me, oh, shining around now. Sorry, that's horrible. But one of the songs that they perform, the older song, when they sing those songs together, when it's both their voices, or like in I Got a Feeling, like when those voices come together, it is one of my favorite things in music. It's incredible, and it's as important and as amazing as any other musical collaboration that's ever existed in time, or any other musical expression. And those two guys are we were fucking lucky as shit sandwiches. I don't know if the shit sandwich is that lucky, but we were lucky as shit sandwiches that both those guys found each other and were able to perform with each other. And because I don't think, sometimes you need all those people together. I made the Wu-Tang comparison, but it's not completely non-apropos in the sense of having like all these talents in one group. And George too. And I don't want to poo-poo George or even Ringo. Like, people can say whatever they want about Ringo compared to the drummers of that next generation. The Mitch Mitchells, John Bonhams, Keith Moons, which were these beasts behind the kit, right? But Ringo wasn't just a drummer. Ringo was a personality. He had songs. He was one of the first guys to sing behind the kit. You wouldn't have people like or you would, but like it helped influence for people like Don Henley and Phil Collins and shit like that, and Dave Grohl and other people that like played drums and sang. And like Ringo was a personality. he was in movies, and he was an actor. He was the one with the standout from the Hard Day's Night and the Help movies. So he was the one that got more of a movie career after the fact. He's a drummer's drummer because they know how many different styles and different ways he can play. The Beatles knew how fucking lucky they were to have that guy that doesn't care about necessarily having his. He's there to serve the interest of the fucking song. And ask most guitar players and shit like that, do you want a guy that's fucking do you want John Bonham? Yeah, you fucking want John Bonham. Because John Bonham knew how to do that too. But I'm saying like jam band drummer type stuff. Like Ringo was underrated as a way of keeping that band together, you know, and they had drummer problems for years and then finally found Ringo who kind of put it all together. And Ringo had a hit song. They all had number one songs after the Beatles, including Ringo. I think Ringo was the first one. What was that song? You guys know the song. But Ringo was like the first one of them all that have a hit song, I think. Or maybe it was George with whatever. John is a stud rhythm guitar. That's one of those things I didn't realize as much either. Like John's a lot better of a guitar player than I ever realized seeing him on these jams. He, especially with Paul there. And like him, Paul, and George just jammed together really, really well. And even when George was just gone, when George just isn't there, some of my favorite musical sections of it were those two times where a Beatle was missing and they still played. When George is gone and Paul and John and Ringo just play. And when Paul disappears for a while and George and John and Ringo play, and they play like I Got a Feeling and John sings Paul's part. It's like I dig that type of stuff a lot. Yet Ringo was the extremely like the best drummer for that band. John Bonham might be my favorite rock drummer ever because he's the best rock drummer ever. Like, no, he's not fucking, I'm not going to start bringing Buddy Rich into the discussion because then, you know, Buddy Rich destroys all, or Gene Krupa or any of those guys, any of those jazz dudes, you know, that's a different conversation altogether. Buddy Rich is the guy that taught Bonham what to do. But for me, for my money, I'm starting a rock band. And I can get any drummer in the universe through history. I'm getting John Bonham, drummer of Led Zeppelin, for those of you that don't know. The Beatles would not have been better with John Bonham. Ringo was the guy. Ringo needed to be the guy. Could Bonham have done it? Yeah, but they would have held him back way too much. There was times when Ringo's playing and they're like, Ringo, you're getting kind of loud. Ringo is not a loud drummer. So Ringo was the perfect guy for the perfect time in the perfect band. Ringo could keep tempo better than almost any drummer in history, I would argue. And I think that's what made him such a perfect force for that band, because with all the songwriting and the way that they would bounce around ideas and even the way they jammed, to have a drummer that could just easily pick up to any quick syncopation that they were doing. And even if he wasn't playing the right thing that they wanted him to play in the end, he could still sort of sit there and help them back up their idea. And that's something you see them all do. Even when John's working on something or George is working on something, Paul will go over to the drum set for a second. John will go over to the drum set for a second if Ringo's not there. And they all support each other, even when they argue and shit on each other. At this point in time, when they're as far apart as they ever could have been at the beginning of all of this, they're still supportive of each other's ideas, except for George's. When I say that, I mean John and Paul. And George, by the end, turns into, how you imagine George is usually with them, and accepting of his lot. But he just, whatever they talked about in private at that point in time, they probably just promised to give him respect or let him do a solo album at some point in time in the future. Ringo. Moon, give me Keith Moon. No, amen to that. And that's the thing. Everyone could have their particular rock drummer. Someone might say Mitchell's their favorite rock drummer, dude from fucking Queen, or fucking Lars Ulrich, or fucking Dave Grohl, or whatever. For me, if I'm starting a rock band, I'm starting a fucking starting John Bonham's the guy I'm picking. But Ringo was so chill. He really worked for the band and for the sound that they were trying to do. So let me take a shot and start to wrap up this discussion. So if you guys have any other questions or comments about this documentary, please let me know. Not ending right now, but on the downward slide here of our discussion here. Let me take another drink here. Oh yes. Oh yes. But yes, I do feel like I wish they played more live shows, as I said at the end. There's not much I didn't get to see that I wanted to see. I feel like they did a decent job of the times that they chose to cut and bring it in. They showed you each day when each guy was coming into the studio and each guy was leaving the studio. So you would get a real-time sort of focus on how their days went. If anything, I could have watched legitimate real-time footage of this. This is where I feel like I'm not the best person to be critical of this. So now that I've glowed about this for a while, let me say what's not good about this for some people, where I see some complaining about it in the comments. You look in comment sections, you look at responses to this, you see mostly positive people saying positive things. Then you see a few of the same kind of negative comments, which are, it's boring, it doesn't have any narrative, it's just, I couldn't watch it. I tried watching 5 minutes of it and I couldn't do it. And I completely understand that, and I will promise I will deal with all your concerns in a few moments. Whoa, oh shit, I'm sorry. Oh my God, what was I fucking thinking? I'll be right back. This musical interlude is brought to you by a sip of Coke.
Grab your sword and shield. It's a stolen horse is real. It's Groundhog Day on a 3-day course.
Oh, and just for the record, that's not a euphemism. Like, I'm not like doing drugs or anything. I'm really gonna take a sip of Coke.
Stick in the mud, in the fairy rains, in the mouths of floods. It's funny how evil can push politeness. You can't fight. It's a time crisis. A palm shoot to go scrub. It's a story in a Goron run. The magic handbook keeps the force. Try to hunt up the dreams of the worst. Free men.
Now, to answer your questions out there, Bonham goes hard. Ginger Baker, he's a really great one too. Levon Helm, Stuart Copeland's another one of my favorites. Stuart Copeland might be my second. Like, if I was going to start a band, Stuart Copeland might be number 2 for me, besides Bonham. Like, not that he's my second favorite. I'm going to do a podcast on all my favorite drummers, and that would be really fun. I might even be able to play drumming clips and not get it copywritten if I'm playing like just drum solos by different drummers. But maybe yet. Ringo, I don't think any of them were really, I think they all experimented with acid, weed, different hallucinogenic drugs. And I think the only one that really went down the bad drug path was John. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm pretty sure that none of the rest of them really got too heavy into more dangerous substances other than weed and hallucinogenic drugs like mushrooms and acid and things like, not that those things can't be dangerous at times, but you know what I mean when I say bad drugs. Holy shit, we got the one and only Mandrell in the live motherfucking chat right now. Great to see Mandrell, our good buddy. Hopefully you had a good Thanksgiving as well. Starting to wrap things up here, but not going out quite yet. Where are we at? 1:42. I will probably stop this at about 2 hours or something like that. Or actually, we're not at 1:42. That's how long I've been streaming on this one. But yeah, 1:30. Yeah, I'll probably be on for another 10, 15 minutes here. But yes, talking a little bit about the Beatles documentary. I think one thing that I got out of this documentary too is being someone that records music and has played in bands my whole life in different groups. And I want to see one of these for like every band. I like this. I want to see, like other bands have put out making album footage and documentaries. I kind of want to see the raw footage edited together in this way for some of my other favorite bands. I hope Peter Jackson makes this, does his own trilogy of like the Beatles, Pink Floyd, and I'm not the biggest Stones fan, but I know people are, so I guess you can do the Stones too. I don't hate the Stones. I just think when I'm start mentioning some of the greatest rock bands of all time, like these big, crazy rock bands, okay, like the Who, for instance. I am not a Who fan. Like, I've seen the Who live twice. I think the Who rocks, and I think the Who belongs in the discussion. Like, the Who fans that say the Who are the greatest rock band of all time, and they're fucking amazing and over the top, I say, power to you. I see what you see. They're just not my favorite. You know, I'm a Zeppelin guy. I'm from the house of Zeppelin, not the house of the Who. But the Who, I understand. The Beatles, because of the foundation aspect of it, I understand that. And obviously, I've talked over and over here about Zeppelin, and I know I'm lose people here at the end trashing the Stones, but I almost agree with what Paul McCartney said a couple of months ago, where he's like, yeah, the Stones are just kind of like a bluesy band. They're all right. I think they write a bunch of good songs, but I wouldn't compare them to Zeppelin or Floyd, in the same way. Like, their songs are more, I don't know. I don't want to trash the Stones too much. This is pro Beatles, not trashing Stones. Journey's another great band. Interesting that the foundation of Journey came from the foundation of Santana. Some of the keyboard players from Santana went on to start Journey. Journey has a lot of really iconic songs. A lot of bands, if they're your favorite band, when you get into like rock music fans, or any music fans with any acts, but we're talking specifically about rock bands here. When you start getting into that band, it's a fine line between, is that band the greatest band of all time, or is that band my favorite band? My favorite rock band is probably Pink Floyd or the Beatles. I think in my mind, when I hear the album Physical Graffiti, in the light, everyone like the night. When I listen to Zeppelin songs and I see Zeppelin live, Zeppelin to me is the greatest rock band of all time. That's me. Some people could say it's Queen. Some people could say it's fucking Guns N' Roses. Some people could say it's fucking one of those other 90s grunge bands like freaking Pearl Jam or Alice in Chains. Or, some people could say it's Jane's Addiction or the Chili Peppers even. But if I'm saying what I think, if I'm talking about those classic 70s, amazing rock, 70s, 60s rock bands, the Stones I almost more respect for their longevity. I don't think they're tremendously good players. I don't think any guy in the band is a tremendously good player. The Stones, it's like no one's done more with less. Keith's just a good songwriter, and Mick is just like has a good style about him and stuff. He's got a good voice, like the stuff that Mick sounds really good on. Paint It Black, Wild Horses, Sympathy for the Devil. Like, I think the Stones have a bunch of iconically, amazingly written rock classics. I just wouldn't put them in the discussion as the greatest rock band of all time. And maybe I'm just a sour dick, but if I'm going by like musical talent in the band, by that metric, and by like my favorite songs, the Stones wouldn't be on my list. That's just what I'm saying. And again, I understand some people, the Stones are number fucking one. When they say rock and roll, it is the Stones. They would be like, fuck you and your Zeppelin, Beatles, Pink Floyd stuff. Aren't you missing somebody? And I know to a lot of people, like, and what's funny is I've named all these rock bands and they're all British rock bands. One of the questions I like to kind of put out there is someone mentioned Boston. I actually, one of my bands played a show where the bass player for Boston, Fran Sheen, introduced us. the best American rock band. For me, it would probably be Aerosmith. You know, it's hard to, I'm a Boston guy, so I'm a little biased to Aerosmith, but I'm talking about like early rocky, like rock and roll Aerosmith, not Pink is my favorite crayon Aerosmith. Then you get the Doors, obviously. You got a bunch of and then you get the whole hippie shit and all those hippie people. Like the percentage of the world that I'm about to piss off right now, where those bunch of delusional bastards that think the Grateful Dead are the fucking greatest band of all time. You guys, sorry. A decent, all right jam band. Sloppy most of the time. Jerry, man. You see the colors that Jerry plays, man? Oh my God, you see how he misses those notes? He does that on purpose. No, he doesn't do that not on purpose. He does it because he's sloppy. No, don't get me wrong. Mickey Hart's in the rhythm section of the Dead's pretty fucking good. And I like the Pigpen years. Just to show you I actually know what I'm talking about. Fucking future Deadhead watching this, getting pissed at me for trashing your fucking overrated band that was always sloppy more than you were tight and never really recorded much that good of music. But I did like the Pigpen years. Very bluesy. Thanks for doing this, Phil. I wanted to talk about this so much with people that... Me too. I've been wanting to talk about this documentary, and thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to. As now here at the end, like I said, I'm just going to babble and about other stuff, but this was... I hope this isn't the last time I come out here and do a full Beatles discussion. At some point, I might want to do like a Beatles history thing with somebody like I did with the Pink Floyd one. I enjoy talking about this stuff. I've seen pretty much every Beatles documentary thing, whether it be the Complete Beatles or the Beatles Anthology or now this, or make the Let It Be thing, Magical Mystery Tour, everything. So the Beatles are definitely, like I said, my top 3 bands would be Pink Floyd, the Beatles, Zeppelin. As rock bands, not like musical acts, just saying rock bands, those 3 are top 3. The other 2 spots would be more difficult to figure out. If I'm figuring out the other 2 in my top 5, one of them would be weird. Like you'd be like, really, Phil? But remember, this is my favorite, not best. The next one would probably be Blind Melon. And then the last on that list would probably be rock band's favorite, probably Jane's Addiction, maybe. So that would probably be my top 5, my favorite. If I'm getting into the best, that's a different conversation altogether. You can watch this documentary, Managerial, on Disney+. But I will warn you, as I've said earlier, just to kind of get through this before, it is less like a documentary and more like you're watching found footage, essentially, or you're watching the raw footage for a documentary before it is edited. So it seems like at times it's uncomfortable in the way of watching a camera focus, seeing what's happening during idle times. So I was mentioning this earlier before I went on a different rant. I love this because being in so many bands and so many projects together, creative type projects, it rings so many bells and so much truth. But I'm not sure if you're not into the idea of seeing within the looking glass of that, or you're a huge Beatles fan or just a fan of rock history in general enough to see this. Like I like Elvis. I don't love Elvis. I couldn't get enough of watching the Elvis documentary because he's a part of rock and roll history. I just like hearing about it and doing all of that even more so than I'm a fan of things. The Eagles are great, but not the Beatles, says Scott. I especially love Joe Walsh. He's my favorite Eagle. He's the cool one, obviously. Obviously, he's the one I like the best. But again, if we're going to greatest American rock bands and stuff, I think you look a lot more to artists rather than, rock bands. The great bands are mostly from from across the ocean. I mean, there are a lot of really great individual American bands too that definitely are worth mentioning. Did you see that they're making a Grateful Dead movie and that dude is playing him? What's his name? Jonah Hill. I did see that. And yeah, I went on some rant in the comment section on that. I was like, can't you guys spend time talking about a band that doesn't need more attention? But again, the Grateful Dead thing was more about the whole scene. The band became second nature. It didn't matter that the band was off every night. No one cared. They were on too many drugs by the end. They were overanalyzing it so much it didn't matter. They were disguising it with so many different sounds and visuals and big things, and it didn't matter that their band was trash from basically 1978 on. It didn't matter. They were all right early on. They were an all right little tight jam band, but after a certain point in time, they just became sloppy. Fucking sloppy. I'm such a dick. But yes. Eagles had some good songs too, just like the Beatles. Eagles are just very different. I cannot even see a Beatles as a rock band, to be honest. And that's the thing that's interesting about the Beatles, because they come in so many different eras. And the early Beatles are definitely a straight rock band. You know, when you see that early stuff, it's a different kind of music. But then some of the most, how do I say this, often played Beatles music through history, the stuff that gets played more often on the radio in repetition now and historically in the last 30 years, is their later music. You'll hear Love Me Do, you'll hear Please Please, but for the most part, the songs you hear on the radio in rotation more are the later stuff, the stuff from Sgt. Pepper's, the stuff from Magical Mystery Tour, the stuff from Abbey Road, Let It Be, like that later stuff, Rubber Soul, Revolver, like that stuff on, where the Beatles are less of a rock band and they're more of a musical project. They started to become a rock band again, and that was the point of this whole project in this documentary, is about them getting back to being a rock band. But too much time had passed to really kind of, like, it took a little while to get it going again, and then they got it going again, and that's where you see them at the end. And if you watch the end part of this documentary, which is the whole rooftop performance, yes, again, they play, because they were trying to get takes for recording, so they play a couple of versions of each song. They play I Got a Feeling, Get Back, Don't Let Me Down, and that Move Over, Honey, whatever it's called. And I think they play one version, maybe twice, of I Dig a Pony. Maybe they don't even get to that. I think maybe they play it once. And they're playing it as a rock band. And like when you're watching parts of this, if I start to think about them like that again, even when they're jamming songs, I mentioned it like 4 times now, Strawberry Fields, or at one point they do a fucked up version of Help, or they do the versions of Maxwell Silver Hammer, which is on the later album, which is on the next album. You hear them playing these songs live, and you can hear them again as a rock band. But if you think about them as a rock, but if you're comparing them, or I'm trying to compare them to rock bands like I'm saying Zeppelin, Queen, Metallica, fucking Guns N' Roses, Kiss, Soundgarden, Them Crooked Vultures, Pink Floyd, but the Doors, like all those huge rock band type stuff. It's hard to think about the Beatles next to them in the sense of like the sound. And I think it's because the Beatles never had an opportunity to really tour in the way that some of those other bands did with these big, huge sounds. So the Beatles were always, as Paul McCartney put it, a nice little club rock band, like a band you would see when it comes to the sound wise. Like they're not an arena rock band. They're a band that you would go see in a club and they'd be just loud enough and like that. No, they're a nice little rock band when it comes from the rock band standpoint. And that's the fucked up thing about the Beatles, because musically, they're just all, except for Paul, who's a fucking phenom on the bass, they're all very, and John is like incredible on rhythm guitar, and George is an exceptional, clean soloist. But there's no virtuoso like in the sense of like a band like Zeppelin, where all four of them were disgusting with what they did. Bonham could play drums for 2 hours and entertain you. Jimmy Page could sit on stage for 3 weeks playing guitar and make you fucking lose your shit, let alone sit on stage with an acoustic guitar. Oh my God. No one's better on acoustic than Jimmy Page. And then John Paul Jones is one of the most underrated musicians ever to walk the face of the earth as an incredible keyboard and bass player. One of the best. You think Bonham was incredible? John Paul Jones matched every fucking thing, single fucking thing he did. And he was such a good keyboard player that when they didn't have bass on songs, you didn't miss it because he was fucking playing it. And Bonham's foot was so fucking strong, it didn't fucking matter. I should do a rock doc series. I would love to do that. Something like a full series documentary of my version or my perspective on the history of music. There's definitely some other folks I would like to bring into that discussion that I know that know a lot about this stuff as well. My cousins Craig and Alan especially are part of the reason I know what I know. They helped influence me. Big Daddy Matt, as I mentioned, and I know Tony as well has a very large array of music knowledge of all genres. So I'm sure Tony would love to be on something like that, or I would love to have Tony on something like that as well. So definitely something I want to think about doing, because I feel like some of these discussions I don't have to, I'm not really reading script. I'm not recapping something. It's just fun to kind of talk about opinions. We could even do breakdowns of albums and different records and shit like that. You know, I wish I could play music here. Like I did it on the Pink Floyd one, and I think that might be blocked in 7 countries or something, where I could actually play clips and play parts of music and stuff and not just get shit blocked every fucking 5 minutes. What do you think about the Guns N' Roses and the Red Hot Chili Peppers? Martin Scorsese. Yeah, it was Martin Scorsese's making it. That's why I was like, fucking motherfucker. Watch Let It Be last night. It's not really that negative as people say. It's mainly music. It is. I think it's that fight between George and Paul that really stands out when they start, when people point at the fight. I'll play what you want me to, Paul. And the way it's cut seems worse. And I said that at the beginning. This is way less Beatles breaking up than was advertised for years talking about these sessions. And it's more questions coming out of it like, ugh, how shit must have gone so bad in between the end of what we see here and the start of Abbey Road, because things seemed pretty optimistic at the end. They were all so high on life after the show, smiling and like, oh my God, we did that. That was so good. And they were so off on each other. You know, like you'd see the looks on their faces like, oh my God, we just did that. It was awesome. We got to do this more. We should play a whole show. We should play a concert. Closed circuit TV. We should do like Elvis did in 1969, or except, you know, Elvis is 68. You know, this is all like, you could see how excited they were about that and everything that would happen with the management and with the Apple stuff. All of which I'll again say, the biggest reason the Beatles broke up wasn't Yoko, wasn't arguments because of the way they treated George. I think they would have been able to do solo albums and handle all those problems. The biggest thing that caused the Beatles breaking up, unfortunately, was the death of Brian Epstein and never getting a reasonable, trustable replacement. And when shit hit the fan with money and deciding with the whole Apple thing, like if they had always had Brian to handle their finances and keep them just doing all the art and staying all out of anything to do with business aspect, I think they would have stayed as a family. Again, I've said it 3 times now, just like Wu-Tang Clan, like even though they argue and hate each other and they go, oh, I want to sue RZA and fucking hate, they still will come back together and do shit together because they're one fucking family. And I think the Beatles would have always been like that if they didn't get too businessy together. And with the Apple and starting the company and trying to figure out who's going to run the company and losing rights to their music and all that sort of shit. So what do I think about Guns N' Roses and the Red Hot Chili Peppers? I think, okay, the Chili Peppers, I think, are at a certain point in time were one of my favorite bands. Up till Blood Sugar Sex Magic. I think all those albums when they were funk punk, sort of almost a metal band at times, heavy, out of control, Flea's going crazy, dirty lyrics on the borderline of comical at times. That was my favorite era of the Chili Peppers. I think One Hot Minute is a decent album. I think Californication is a decent album. I don't love the emo Chili Peppers that became Stadium Arcadia and By the Way and any album that came after that. There are more songs that I enjoy, and they're still very high quality of a band, like talent-wise. They all can kill it on their instruments. And I prefer Anthony rapping and scatting rather than singing. And when he sings too much, I don't think it comes off as disingenuous to me and cringy at times. Deep inside the corner of another summer, like I feel like that era of the Chili Peppers, Frusciante should have just sang, because he's writing songs that he sings better than Anthony does. I think Anthony's best thing is, I think Under the Bridge was the worst thing that could have happened. I think the success of Blood Sugar Sex Magik was the worst thing that could have happened to Anthony Kiedis as a vocalist, because of how successful Under the Bridge was. He was like, oh, people like it when I sing, not when I scat rap. I should just keep doing that. And not that I don't like songs here and there, but I feel like the Chili Peppers peaked at Blood Sugar Sex Magik. My favorite 2 records by them are that and Mother's Milk. Those 2 early Frusciante albums, coming off when Frusciante still was trying to be Hillel Slovak before he got a little too emo for me. I do like the album with Dave Navarro, One Hot Minute, as I said, but I think it's a little bit too much of a hybrid Jane's Chili Pepper album, and they don't quite mesh too well, and I don't think Anthony's good on that album, but there are some great songs. Walkabout, One Big Mob, Oh Yeah, Oh Yeah. And the whole second half of that album, I think the album gets better as it goes. Airplane's a good song as well. I think, my friends, I think in general that album has some good songs, but I think it leads things into a difficult location. Then I think Californication has some good songs, but again starts to bring them down the road to the emo Pepper type stuff that I don't necessarily appreciate. Guns N' Roses, I think Guns N' Roses is an interesting band because they're a transitional hair band to grunge band kind of band, because they weren't as vapid as some of the hair bands were. And don't get me wrong, I love me a good Motley Crue and Poisoned and fucking Skid Row and Tesla, like sign everywhere, sign. But a lot of that music was just, it wasn't very deep or ballsy. Then you had a band like Guns N' Roses that was able to, not Motley Crue to a lesser extent, but that was more in their attitude, not their music. Guns N' Roses brought in a little bit more of that dirty LA sound that was existing at the time, that later was done to extreme amazingness by Jane's Addiction. But they were in that same LA scene. Chili Peppers were in that scene early on too, like had more of a rocker, surfer rock kind of vibe to it all. And Guns N' Roses was influenced by the hair bands, which were influenced by Queen, The Who, and Zeppelin, and trying to water that down. And then when you get to the point of Guns N' Roses sort of opened things up in a way, I think, for grunge. And I think Guns N' Roses and Jane's were like opening that door without people realizing they were opening the door for rock music, good rock music to come back. And again, I'm not trashing hair metal bands, but I mean like more what I like, blues, jam rock stuff that actually has musicality to it, with not just the guitar players. Whereas a lot of the 80s bands, the bass players were trash. Nikki Sixx is a pretty good bass player. Billy Sheehan, good bass player. Or is that his name, Billy Sheehan, from Mr. Big and other bands? But like for the most part, those bands were all about the ripping lead guitar player and the vocalist with the high screechy vocals. The other instruments didn't matter quite as much. And then you get into later like jam rock music, and I think Guns N' Roses and later on Jane's helped institute that to open up a world that became open for a band like Nirvana to hit. And then people want to group grunge music as a style of music. It's more of a genre cloud of time, because I don't think there's a lot of similarities in sounds between the prime grunge bands, you would say. Like, I don't think Nirvana necessarily sounds like Pearl Jam or sounds like Alice in Chains or sounds like Soundgarden. I think those are just like rock bands again, like we're like 70s style rock bands, blues rock. But then there are a lot of other bands that made it in popped up during that time period that I consider in that grunge boom, like Smashing Pumpkins. I said Blind Melon earlier. A handful of other ones that came out of that era and weren't necessarily from Seattle. But anyways, I do like Guns N' Roses, but I specifically like Appetite for Destruction and Lies the best, the first album and the EP. Use Your Illusion, I think I generally can listen to the whole thing, but I don't love every song on it. I think unlike most double albums with bands like Physical Graffiti or the White Album, which I love, or All Eyes on Me, I'm like, give me more. I could take four versions of all three of those albums, double album me across the face with a double dick. I don't give a fuck, But I think that's the case. Use Your Illusion started the Axl problem, which I think Use Your Illusion could have been one great album, but instead was two albums of some material that should have been left on the cutting room floor or live tracks alone. After that, after Use Your Illusion, Izzy Stradlin left the band, and I think the band never was quite the same. Then Axl sort of kicked everyone out. You got that Velvet Revolver stuff with Scott Weiland, with some of the guys from the band. Then eventually Guns N' Roses got back together again. You have the Chinese Democracy fiasco with Axl recording an album for 10 fucking years and keep changing it and changing it and changing it. I think Shaq was on that album at one point in time, Buckethead, and then eventually Guns N' Roses got back together again. They toured again as the whole band. But I think Guns N' Roses really lost their thing when Izzy Stradlin left that band, because I think he was the songwriter. I think Axl takes a lot of credit in that band, Slash takes a lot of credit in that band, but the prime songwriter for most of Appetite and Use Your Illusion, which and Lies, which you could say were their best songs and all their most memorable songs, were all from Izzy Stradlin, So yeah, that's my thoughts of Guns N' Roses. Yeah, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Ringo Rammstein. I love me some Rammstein. Pumpkins are underrated as well, especially those early albums are really good. I especially love Gish is really special to me. And Siamese Dreams as well. Really good live band. Jimmy Chamberlain, their drummer, is one of my favorite drummers of the modern age. I like him better than Steve Perkins or Chad Smith or anyone that has, or Dave Grohl. I think Jimmy Chamberlain, when he's on the top of his game, is disgusting good. Fucking disgusting. Black Sabbath, incredible band. Jack White, Jimmy Page, and The Edge, so good. And I'm not even a huge U2 fan, but I had a new love after them. Absolutely. November Rain is epic. Great fucking song. Great fucking song, Phil. Great fucking song. Oh my gosh. It's hot. It's hot. The heat wasn't working yesterday, so we turned the heat gun on, and now I'm like, oh, it's actually getting warm in here. I was so used to it being so cold yesterday. I'm like, right now, I'm like, it's actually too warm. I gotta turn off my radiator when I'm done here. But November, but I love both those bands, Chili Peppers and Guns N' Roses. I feel like I could have a whole long discussion on both of them, but sorry for that little rant. Thank you for the question, Mandra. Let me take one more drink, because I don't like to drink alone, before I let you guys go. Scorpions are great. I feel like 80s bands are like sitcoms. Everyone has their favorites, and you can't tell someone what's good and what's bad. They're like reality shows and sitcoms. Whoa, shit. Let me put the cap back on the bottle, dude. Do it. So everyone, thank you so much, you guys, those of you that joined me. I understand that these type of discussions aren't for everyone, but it means so much to even have a handful of you guys out here tonight sticking with me to talk about this most recent Beatles documentary. It seems like every 20 years or so, we come out with another huge Beatles documentary. Let's hope 20 years from now, we somehow uncover like the making of the Abbey Road record of audio tracks or something, and they can just release it, the Anthology 5. But loved it. Really great stuff. If you're a Beatles fan, it's a no-brainer. Turn it the fuck on. You'll know in the first half an hour of it if it's for you. Might not be for everyone. I said this before. This is not a documentary for everyone. It is slow. It is pointless in the sense of like, excuse me for 1 second. But I think you'll know like right away in the first half an hour or so when you start to watch it. Oh, that water was good. When you realize that you've been talking for 2 hours without a sip of water. You'll know right away the way it's edited and the way it's put together if it's something you can be able to watch. I've said this a few times. And I say this a lot about a lot of things, but I really do mean this on this one. This isn't going to be for everyone. You have to either really be interested in the Beatles process or just into details or something like, or I don't know. I'm not going to assume to tell what type of people are going to like this and what type of people aren't going to like this. I think that's stupid of me. What kind of ass? I got to stop being a Paul McCartney and stop telling people what to think. What I mean is, people are going to have different results to this. You're either watch this. I really feel like it's this kind of thing for me anyways. In my experience and the people I've talked to about this in my regular circle, people are either really loving this or being like, this is what the fuck did you tell me? This is boring. This is trap. What is this? This is like, could someone edit this? What did Peter Jackson do? He farted on a fucking editing screen and just put footage. Like, what is this? So for me, I felt like I was an intrusive Jiminy Cricket sitting on the shoulders of the Beatles as they work on one of the most tense moments in their entire career that really could have ripped them apart. But instead, we see the story, which I think the story is that no matter how much these guys can fight and bicker and argue, when it's time to get shit together, they get shit together. They just know how to do it. They know how to work together and they know how to make the show happen. Those moments on that roof at the end of this, when they start to realize there's an audience there and that this is working. And then at the end, the last couple of songs, when the cops show up and John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and they're all aware that the cops are like pissed off that they're playing, you just see this youthful joy in their faces as they're playing together again. It brings me so much joy. It's such an Andy Dufresne kind of thing with this documentary because it is 9, I don't know how many hours. Each one's almost 3 hours, so it's like 8 hours and change or something like that. I can't do math. I don't do math. So it does feel a little bit like you're being Andy Dufresne, like climbing through the fucking pile to get to the end here, to get that glorious moment where you see them on stage that one last time, the last time they performed together. Yeah, they got back together for an album. Yeah, they've performed one-offs with each other in pairs at different times. But this was the last time the four of them played on a stage in a live setting together, with Billy Preston playing keyboards too to fill out the sound. But that's the Beatles. That's what the Beatles would have sounded like in 1969 had you seen them live. And it comes through a lot of clawing through a tunnel of shit. And you feel the weight of the 8+ hours that you're watching of this fucking thing. And who am I kidding? I was at the edge of my seats, knowing that I knew what was coming at the end, knowing that this all somehow came together. Maybe not to the point where it came together that they got everything that they wanted, but they ultimately did, other than some idiot fucking selling the Let It Be songs or giving the Let It Be songs to fucking Phil Spector to overproduce them. Like, if they had just let George Martin do that maybe a year or two after the Beatles had broken up and let him clean up those songs with edits and shit, even though John didn't want that, he probably would have eased up on that later. Part of the reason why that was so hard for them to get takes is by John Lennon's decree. It's not as detectable, but I've listened to different documentaries with George Martin talking about this. And the reason why they were doing it live like this was John. John wanted it to be live, 100%, no takes, no overdubs, just live performances, vocals and music, all live. That the record sounded like the band jamming. And so a lot of times George Martin got frustrated because he'd be like, half a song was good, half a song was bad. Can I just splice them together? And John Lennon would be like, nope, we're doing this live. And that's what became so frustrating. That's why they had like 47 takes of some songs, because they couldn't quite get it right to a point where everyone was happy. Sometimes the music would be right, but there's one dead note on a vocal or something. So again, to know that they did get at least a handful of really good takes of these songs and live versions of the band playing them fucking live. I'm redundant, but just to say, they're not studio songs. It's awesome to think about the success story of this whole fucking thing, and that they actually did. They were sitting on the toilet for a while, but they finally did poop. Oh my goodness. Duration is I love that. I will watch the documentary and leave you a comment under the video. Please do, Natalie. Please do. And anyone that's just watching this discussion that you haven't watched the documentary, please watch the documentary. Let me know what you think. If you think it's the most boring thing you've ever seen in your life. And Phil, how could you talk for 2 hours about a fucking, usually I talk more about the time. Usually I'm talking 2 hours about a half an hour show. So I feel like if it's that long, if it's 157,173,173,138 minutes. Maybe I should do the podcast longer. No, November Rain is epic. Scorpions. Then Radiohead came, and Oasis and the grunge movement began to fall. Yep, and the emo thing came up. Even bands like Dashboard Confessional became popular there for a while, and then there was a little bit of resurgence. And then with rock music, it sort of died out. Then the White Stripes came in, that sort of brought back a little bit of a raw rock and roll thing. Yeah. And then you can't forget the rap metal phase with bands like Rage Against the Machine was great doing what they did, but that influenced bands like Limp Bizkit and eventually bands like Korn and, blah, 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 blah. There's that whole era of that music too, and Smack My Bitch Up and Get Prodigy and shit like that. Snap my picture, smack my picture. Phil plus rock and roll and discussions, good time. Oh, thank you. I like doing this. It's a different kind of feel for me than reviewing a movie or talking about a TV show or something like that. It's reminds me a lot more of the childhood discussions I had with all my friends when we used to always we'd be like those high fidelity guys, minus some of the, talent and class, but where we just sit and argue rock and roll, who the greatest guitar players are, and have these long, dark, crazy discussions about those types of things. George Martin and John Snow. Exactly. George R. Martin and John Snow Lennon are working on the latest chapters of Winds of Winter. There is I'll wait to talk about that in the Game of Thrones thing. I just kept waiting to see who was going to suggest the roof jam, and I was shocked. Me too. When it finally comes down to who the people that are into it and who aren't, I mentioned that a little bit earlier. It was so amazing that it was Ringo and John that were just like, we're fucking doing this. Fuck you, Paul. And if it wasn't for Ringo and John being bullish about it, they probably wouldn't have done it. And we would have really been out of one of the signature amazing moments in rock and roll history, them playing on that rooftop. And I love them interviewing all the people in London that are just like, yeah, those are the Beatles. Yeah, that's wonderful. It's good. And then the cops show up, they're like, we've got 30 complaints in 5 minutes. I don't believe you. I think you just got pissed off. The end is just surreal, awesome fun too, when the cops show up and they're playing and disturbing the peace. And it's just really, it's everything I wanted in the sense of watching that Let It Be movie years ago and feeling like I wanted more material. This gave me going into this, I'm not going to say I was dubious of it. I was like, I saw the Let It Be movie. Is this just going to be like the outtakes of that? And it was, but it was so much more too, because it actually allowed me to see what that was all about, get more context from it, from something that was edited much tighter. And this era of the Beatles is always very hush hush because it's right before the breakup, and it's post, their exploring phases and post Epstein's death. I think that's an era that is shrouded in a little bit more, mystery than some of the other eras of the Beatles. Toast to everybody. The doc is called Get Back, Bob. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Natalie, I wanted to say it that other way. Like I said, I'm Ron Burgundy. I read that literally. I couldn't help but read it. Part 1 is 157 minutes. Part 2 is 173 minutes. Part 3 is 138 minutes. The whole thing is 157,173,138 minutes. Honestly, Natalie, I would watch that. Hey, where's your fucking Walking Dead advent calendar? Shh. Thou shalt not talk about The Walking Dead. Joe and I are in denial right now. We're in denial that that's ever coming back right now. But yes, there is an advent calendar in the works. I believe. Oh, sorry, my beard got cut in my mouth filter thing. I'll try to have that for the season premiere of when it comes back after the first of the year. Okay, everyone, I will wrap this up now. You guys have been incredibly amazing and kept this as a lot of fun. This discussion was really fun. I need to do these music discussions more often, and I'm not sure how I would frame them. Do them by the decade, do them by bands, do them by albums, do them by something. I'll think about it. As always, though, I've had a lot of fun talking about music. We've done the top guitar player thing. You can find that somewhere on the channel. Our favorite guitar players of all time. There's a Pink Floyd one of these things somewhere, but I will try to do some more of these. If you have any requests, I know some have been thrown in the chat, but I'm going to be editing the beginning because the volume was all fucked up at the beginning. So the chat probably won't be with this. So if you have any suggestions of musical stuff you might want me to cover, anything about any era or any particular band or any specific question type of thing, please leave it in the comment section of this video after it is posted, and I will try to get to it at a later date on a musical discussion. And I will be back soon. I will try to be back with Joe this coming Sunday for some sort of topic discussion. If not, I will be back ASAP. It's been a while since I got to talk to you guys by myself, as I was doing that all season for Only Murders in the Building. But then when that show ended, Joe and I were doing the double fisting Sundays and stuff with Joe, which is always even more fun. But I'm obviously somebody that needs to occasionally do one of these things where it's just me going blah, 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 for 2.5 hours, plus to just get this out so all the people in my life don't have to listen to this shit. No one wants to hear me. Unless I'm talking about a subject that's somewhat interesting to them. So, but in real life, you don't want to. My real life people are just like, Probably only my imagination. In my mind, my whole life is just a whacked out episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, but it's probably not that bad in reality. Phil, you never know. People believe you, and they'll search the rest of their life for these parts now. You never can tell. So the wrong person may listen to me. Have a great night. You guys have been... Will I do The Witcher? I have to catch up on the first season of it, but one of either Joe and I will make mention of it on one of these things. But The Witcher isn't a show I am completely caught up on right now. Having actually surprisingly never played the video games. I didn't check out the series, but I do hear good things about it. I know a lot of awesome people cover it and talk about it, but I will try to check out the series and get a perspective on it for when the new season drops. But right now, if either of you guys, if any of you guys are watching either of these shows, please check out my usual suspects buddies on their channels. Teflon TV for right now is covering the new Dexter reboot and doing it really awesome. Putting out a video a day basically on Dexter stuff. So if you're watching the new season of Dexter and you want some awesome coverage for that, make sure you subscribe to Teflon TV. And Bridge 4 is all up in the Wheel of Time. So make sure you subscribe and checking out Bridge 4 for any of that coverage for that kind of stuff. And in both cases, tell him Phil sent you. But no, thank you guys, and I will be back very, very soon for some more silliness. Wait, I'll take the last shot as the music's playing. So, but if you haven't already and you enjoyed this discussion, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. Now more than ever, it's more important that you share the channel with a friend and you help share these videos so it can get out to more people. Hear more discussions. I love you guys. Toast to you in the sunshine. What time is it? Ooh, it's still early. I'm like, is it early? Is it too late to play drums? Oh, yes. Oh no, I need to play. That sucks. I'm no Ringo.